Putin Bad News Russian protests are raging. Russia's President Vladimir Putin stands to gain politically even if he had nothing to do with Yevgeny Prigozhin's murder. The headquarters of the Russian Southern Military District were taken by Prigozhin, leader of the Wagner Group private military company, and his troops on June 23, as they were traveling to Moscow from Ukraine. He met with relatively little resistance and used only limited force. Despite his eventual decision to call off the coup, the message he sent to Putin's inner circle was chilling. The Russian president's position was precarious. A month and a half later, Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that holding free and fair elections was a costly bureaucracy, because Mr. Putin will be re-elected next year with more than 90% of the vote. Prigozhin was killed in a fiery plane crash 2 weeks and 2 months after making that statement. What has happened in Moscow recently reveals profound insecurities. Putin and his supporters may be worried that he is losing the support of the Russian people with elections coming up in about 6 months. Putin may be losing supporters, too. The tragic death of Prigozhin sends a clear message to Putin: test me and you will fail. Thousands of Russians have taken to the streets to protest Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The government's response has been a wave of arrests and increased police brutality. According to Amnesty International, in 2022, over 21,000 Russian anti-war activists were punished with fines or jail time. I warned that Putin faces an internal threat from the Russian people in March, April, and November 2016 articles published in The Hill. Putin's recent actions have only served to further prove this. Prigozhin started out as a loyalist, rose through the ranks, and ultimately betrayed the autocrat. Human Rights Watch claims that shortly after the invasion, Putin signed a law making it illegal for civilians to publicly oppose the war or engage in independent war reporting. Reporters are forbidden from using the terms war or invasion in reference to the conflict, and instead must refer to it as a special military operation. These are not the actions of a leader who is sure that his people will back him up 90% of the time. Putin is exhibiting classic tyrannical behavior. I'll give you an example. Vladimir Rumyantsev spent the last few years of his life in Vologda, a city located about 500 kilometers north of Moscow. Before becoming a furnace stoker, he worked as a trolleybus driver and in a factory. From his apartment, he broadcast his own amateur radio program when he had free time. His signal was so weak that it only reached the nearby apartment buildings, but he enjoyed playing classical music from old Soviet archives. After the invasion of Ukraine, he started giving his thoughts on the conflict online. He's been locked up in a gulag in Russia. A fearless and powerful ruler would never throw in jail a poor furnace stoker just because he has an amateur radio show. Putin is terrified of civilians and his generals in Russia. There are 2 ways in which dictators are removed from power. Either the people themselves organize a successful coup, or a member of the dictator's inner circle betrays him or her. Both of these difficulties have arisen this year for Putin. There will be a public vote for him in 2024. This is a topic that should be discussed at length in the context of foreign policy. Empowering the Ukrainian people, e.g., by sending munitions and other aid, is necessary but not sufficient if Western leaders want Putin out of Ukraine. Putin can only be persuaded to leave Ukraine if the Russian people are given more power. How does that come to pass? Media figures such as journalists Marina Ovsyannikova and Vladimir Kara-Murza, Russian celebrities such as Oxymiron, Russia's most famous rapper, athletes Fedor Smolov and Andrei Rublev, and regular folks like Vladimir Rumyantsev share their stories.